It's time for Electric Conversations, where we look at the developments and people in the EV marketplace and community. Electric Conversations is brought to you by Zap Charge. Here's your host, Rob Hislop.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Electric Conversations. I'm Rob Hislop, and as always, we are brought to you by Zap Charge. You know, our show has been going now, I believe this is episode 72. So we've been going for just over a year now, and it was about actually a year ago, 50 episodes ago, that we interviewed a gentleman from the Electric Vehicle Society of Canada. And we got some great information from him back then. Of course, a lot of things have changed over the last years. Government initiatives have changed. We've, of course, heard pledges from car companies as well as to what they plan to do in the very near future and beyond. So we thought we would bring somebody from the EV Society back on, chat a little bit about that. And then also, we're quite fortunate because the gentleman that we have today has also done a number of talks about EVs and why it's a good idea to consider making an EV your next vehicle. So first, though, let's introduce you to Tim Burrows through a video of his that was on the EV Society.
Of course, there are a lot of things to really love about driving an electric car. One of the things everyone will tell you about, of course, is how quiet they are. It's not just the quiet, it's the lack of any vibration, and it's a combination of incredible acceleration without a lot of sound. It kind of plays with your mind in a good way. It's a very enjoyable experience.
And here's Tim Burrows joining us live now. Tim, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, Rob, it's great to be here.
Now, just to be clear, that is your second EV, is it not, that you were driving?
Yeah, so that clip was taken of a test drive, a virtual drive in a Tesla Model X, which is the car I drive today. It's a 2017 model. But right. I did have a Tesla Model S P85 for those who know the naming protocols back then. But it was a 2013 model. So I've been driving them for a while.
Yeah, well, it seems like you embraced the technology early on, did you not?
Yeah, it fascinated me. You know, I was still working in my career. I was sort of winding things up. I guess it was the last year that I was working. And I just decided to take the plunge. I'd been following that technology for a while, following this company, in this case called Tesla. And I decided just to take the plunge. And so for the last year I was working, I had an electric car. And yeah, I love that tech, and it just captured my imagination. Imagine driving without any gas and being able to refuel at home. Wonderful things.
Well, and you went from the Model S, more of a standard type vehicle, although I imagine it was quite expensive when you got it back then, to the Model X, which seems to be a considerable step up.
Well, they're both, I'll tell you that first one, the Model S was a huge leap for me. I'd never purchased a car in that price bracket before. And I wasn't really even a car enthusiast before I discovered electric vehicles. And yeah, so that was a big jump. And yes, the Model X is another step higher than that. But you kind of get what you pay for a little bit. And it has some very nice features, I must say. But it's not, you know, things like the cars like the Model X and even the S isn't where people need to look for an electric car. If you can afford that and if it suits you, then it's a wonderful option. But there are a lot of great electric cars out there now and more coming every day. So you need to shop a little bit.
Great. Well, Tim, tell us a little bit about the Model X too. I mean, it's your car. You've had it for a while now, so it's no longer new to you, I suppose. But I mean, it is a stunning looking vehicle. So tell us a little bit about it and why you decided to opt for this vehicle.
Well, yeah, the Model X is a full-size, really SUV type of vehicle. And I opted for that primarily because I was getting a little bit older in years, and as much as I love the Tesla Model S, if you've ever climbed into one, you realize it's pretty low to the ground. And even the back seat access requires that you have to be pretty flexible. And we have a family that's also aging, and folks climbing in and out of that car, I could see we're having a little bit of difficulty. So I thought the Model X would be the solution. It's much higher off the ground. You get the visibility that an SUV provides. And the car itself is it's electric, and it's a beautiful car to drive. Lots of little toys and features in it. It opens my garage door when I pull in the driveway for me, and it closes it when I drive away, and many other interesting little gimmicks and features in the car. It's a great car.
Well, one of the things I like is that you seem to enjoy showing your vehicle off at car shows. And let's talk about this picture, because this is the past meeting the future here, isn't it?
Yeah, it was kind of interesting, really. Back in 2013, you have to remember, there weren't very many electric cars on the road. And as I said, I was never a car enthusiast, but I was aware that car cruise events were going on all over the province, and I came to realize it's pretty much any night of the week in the summer you can find one of these car cruise events. And basically, they're a bunch of enthusiasts who have often restored an antique vehicle, brought it into prime condition again. And all these folks, a very social event, all these folks show up in a farmer's field or a big grassy park somewhere with their cars. And, they put out lawn chairs and usually bring food and sit around and tell lies to each other, but show off their cars. And so one day I thought, well, I wonder what will happen if I go in here. So I drove in to one of these things, and the guy at the gate questioned me a little bit, but he did let me through. And of course, people saw me pulling in and parking and started asking right away, what are you doing here? This is really a car club with old cars and so on. And I said, well, you also cater to special interest, right? Special interest vehicles. And they said, yeah. I said, well, this car is kind of special interest because it doesn't use any gasoline at all, not a drop. And so when I started that conversation that way, I started to get barraged with questions, and often, the same questions. And we still get asked those today, those of us who drive battery electric cars. Things like, well, where do you charge it? How long does it take to charge? How far can you go? And all of these questions started to come. And so I enjoyed that, and it spun out into actually a little bit of a speaking gig that I've been doing for a number of years.
Well, and that's Tim Talks Tesla. We'll be getting to that in a little bit. I'm just curious, though. So you say that you go to these shows and you get all these questions. You probably got those same questions back when you bought your Tesla Model S. And are you surprised that you're getting perhaps the same questions today that you would have got almost a decade ago?
Yeah, Rob, really good question. And it's something that I've observed. The questions follow a similar thread over the last 4 years that I've been doing this, 4 or 5 years. But they are evolving. The questions are different. So when I began going out and doing public speaking about electric cars and how they were coming and they're the best thing in the world, and explaining all about them, talking all about them, a lot of people in those early audiences pushed back and said, oh, really? Electric? Where are you going to go? You can't go very far. It's going to have to charge. They're going to put a meter in your house and tax your electricity. There are all of these things that were in the early days were coming back to me in the way of questions and comments. And that has totally evolved. Now, when I do one of these talks, I did one last week. I did 2 last week, actually, for a couple of different groups. The questions are very engaged now. So people are hearing about electric cars in the media. They understand that this transformation is taking place. I don't think most people realize how quickly it's happening, but they realize that this is something that's real in the environment. And so the questions are quite different. So now they are practical questions. They are questions about, what's it going to cost for me to put a charger in my home? Or I live in a condominium. How am I going to charge if I get an electric car? And they're all more practical questions. So it's fascinating. Yeah.
And it sounds like the tone has changed perhaps as well in the way people are asking the questions.
Absolutely. It was almost, I won't say adversarial, but it was definitely questioning the topic to begin with. Now the topic isn't questioned. It's the content and what's it really about. And because I've driven these cars for a number of years, I can just really the whole talk that I do, it's just telling people, sharing your experience. I've been through all these things. I've had 7 winters with these cars. I know what's what. And so I just share that. I'm no expert, but I'm an owner. So
Well, and that's key. And this is an interesting thing that I find is that owners of EVs want to talk about their vehicles. I have never had a vehicle that I felt I've got to go out there and talk about.
Hmm.
And yet you have taken it and you've turned it into, I guess, another career of sorts where you're going out and delivering talks on your own and with groups. And it was kind of fun, actually, when I looked at your page. And the very first picture that popped up was of Leduc, which is, of course, very close to Edmonton. And I've done lots of work out in Leduc as well. So it's kind of fun to see that here in Alberta. You are, on the other hand, in Ontario. So it's still kind of neat to see that. But what is it? I guess what I want to know is, for yourself, why do you feel the need to get out there and talk about these vehicles?
Well, it's really it's another interesting point. So I've had the term tossed around in front of me about me being an evangelist or evangelistic about electric cars, and thinking about that term and applying it in this context makes sense, because really, when you become evangelical about something, it's because you've discovered something that you think is really terrific, and you feel compelled to share that with other people. You want them to be able to enjoy what you're enjoying and to experience the good stuff that you're experiencing. So in that regard, yeah, it's kind of evangelical to go out and promote cars. You just want to do it. So that's really what motivates me. I really enjoy. I've always enjoyed sort of the teaching aspect of things, and being able to talk with folks and give them the answers that they're really craving is quite satisfying.
Well, and no doubt you're not coming at this from an extremely technical point of view, I don't imagine. It's probably more from a personal experience, isn't it?
Yeah, I try and stay away as much as possible from the really technical stuff, partly because I'm incompetent. I don't know a lot of the technology involved. But I know what it's like living with an electric car. I know where there are a few little challenges here and there, and how to deal with them, make them go away. And I know how much pleasure you get from. I got tired of driving in my career. I drove most of my career was involved a lot of driving, and by the time I was ready to retire, I was kind of sick of that. But when I got an electric car, guess what? I started driving more again, just because it was so pleasurable. And I want other people to understand that and get some of these other benefits that are huge. Rob, the other thing I got to say is that I often say this in the talks I do. I'll say something at the end to the effect that it's great that these cars and the whole electrification of transportation is part of the solution to our climate challenge and the climate crisis. Like 25% thereabouts of the CO2 emissions are coming from light duty trucks and passenger vehicles. And if we could chip away and get rid of that, that would be a great thing. But I often say, even if these cars weren't better environmentally, I would still be out doing these talks just to let people know how great they are to live with and drive, and how convenient they are to own. And the performance, is so much better. Even if the environmental aspect is the icing on the cake, but I'd be doing it anyway.
What you mentioned just a moment or so ago, there are some challenges that you try to tell people that you can sort of overcome and dismiss. So, what are some of the challenges that you've heard about that you think can be easily addressed?
Well, things like long distance driving. Okay, fast charging is available now right across Canada. Most people don't realize that you can drive right across the country now on a variety of fast charging networks. Petrocan, for example, right across Canada. Of course, Tesla has their own charging network. But these fast chargers making long distance travel are becoming more commonplace and more accessible. So that's one myth. The other one is another one that you hear all the time is about the batteries, that what's going to happen when all these batteries end up in the landfill site. And you referred to the videos on the EV Society YouTube playlist. Episodes of a webinar that I do are posted there, and there is one there that talks exactly about some of these issues, things like fast charging and winter driving and the like. So those things are all kind of addressed in there.
I find, and maybe you're coming across this as well. So I've been doing this for just over a year, and it seems like there's been a lot of advances in that year. When I first started out, I remember talking to somebody who said they wanted to do a trip from one coast to the other in Canada, and when they plugged in to see where all the charging units were, they were directed, I think it was Calgary was the last spot in the West, and then they had to go down into the States and then pop up again in Ontario. And things have changed. It's gotten a lot easier to do that. Do you find, and this is something I found when I was in media, a lot of people have personal opinions about things without actually doing the research, because the research now really seems to be out there to dispel a lot of the potentially negative topics that were surrounding EVs when it comes to battery recycling, when it comes to range anxiety, when it comes to, in Canada, winter driving as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. No, I think you're absolutely right. But things are changing in that regard. But those questions still persist. And the truth of the matter is that I can stand in front of a group. I can go through all of those concerns and worries, and I think I can dispel them. I mean, they're all things that I've experienced and had to live with, and I've found where you need even to have a workaround. I know what they are, and they're very easy to do. But it doesn't matter. I could answer all those concerns, but at the end of the day, for someone who's been driving a gas or diesel car all their life, and that's all they know, it takes a leap of faith to buy an electric car. Even if somebody answers all of those concerns, you walk up to the edge of it as a gas or diesel car driver, it takes a leap of faith, because you're leaving something that you know very well to something that requires a bit of learning and rethinking about things. I mean, the notion that you can refuel your car at home is such a phenomenal convenience. Nobody is really going to get that. I can tell them that. It takes me 10 seconds to plug my car in, and that's it. Now, it's not like it's way more convenient than standing out at a gas pump on a freezing cold day. But those are experiences that it's hard for people to digest them without actually living through them. So you do what
well, and you also mentioned, I mean, some of the myths. I mean, the cold weather driving. I've had people say that because the Tesla or other EVs are heavier, that they actually find that they perform better in winter driving than what we've got out there now. So I would think too that one of the neat things, because you say it's a new experience and a leap of faith, with buying an EV, at least a Tesla anyway, you don't have to go to a car dealership to look around.
Yeah, that's true, Robin. And it's a different buying experience. And I am one of those folks. I don't really particularly enjoy the prospect of haggling. I always, and again, I'm just speaking for myself, but I always used to walk away from those encounters thinking that I got bested in some way. I never felt that rah for me, I got the best deal going. I would just like to pay a fair price for things, and that's kind of the model where they've gone. You don't haggle, you don't have a dealership to worry about or to deal with, and it's an enjoyable buying experience. And I think as I listen to industry news and see where things are headed, I think other car companies are discovering the same thing. Why have this? I feel badly for dealerships because they depend on sales and customer walk-ins and all of that for their existence. But I think over time, we're going to see the dealership diminished in its role in the whole auto industry.
Well, and it's happened in other industries as well, right? From grocery shopping. I mean, Amazon has done a lot to help us prepare, I guess, for something like that. Amazon and other sites like that. You have mentioned, like, is there anything about the EV? You've mentioned a couple things that you've had workarounds for and stuff like that. But if there are any things that you find a little bit annoying, or things that maybe you weren't expecting when you got the vehicle?
Well, yeah, there always are a few things that come along. So on a long distance trip, and I live near Burlington, Ontario, and I've made the trip with my wife to Disney in California a number of years ago. And so for that, I relied on the Tesla supercharging, their fast charging network, which does make it you're very confident about going on a long trip. One of the things that you do realize, though, is that the car does take a longer to charge than to fill up a gas tank. But if you time it, to be your lunch break or your bio break or supper, or it's an overnight in a hotel on a long trip, if you time it so those are the charging opportunities, it's not so bad. But invariably on a long trip, I found that there were times when the car needed to stop and refuel, but I didn't. So I was following the car's schedule sometimes rather than the human schedule for things. So, that's a slight annoyance. It's just, and that will probably diminish, I expect, as ranges get longer for cars, charging times get faster. That will become less of a noticeable thing. Beyond that, I can't think of too many things, honestly, that surprise me or that I find to be annoying about the experience.
Right. Does not having engine noise improve or deteriorate your singing ability as you're going along with the vehicle?
Oh my gosh, the singing has gone downhill. It
It
really.
has.
Oh yeah, but Tesla plug, their infotainment system now includes karaoke, so
Okay.
there is that.
Well, and now I don't know if it's your vehicle, because I was looking at I think it was a Model X for 2022, but it says it's got 22 speakers in it.
Yeah,
Does yours fit that bill as well?
yeah. I don't think I've ever counted them, but there are a lot of speakers, and the sound system is truly phenomenal. The Tesla Owners Club has, for the last couple of years, held an evening at the Highway 5 drive-in for electric cars, not just Teslas, for all electric cars that want to come. And so they fill up the place with electric cars, and so the system, as you know, at drive-ins, if you've been to one, I hadn't been to one in a while, but the systems now are over a radio frequency. So you just dial your radio into it, and wow, talk about fantastic sound watching a drive-in movie in my car. It was like full surround sound, and it's like I have a really nice system at home. It sounds way better in the car.
Yeah. Wow.
So
Very, very nice. Like, I just heard 22 speakers, and I've been sort of a fanatic when it comes to having a good stereo in my vehicles. My very first car was a Pontiac Astra, and I think it cost me about $1,200, and my stereo system was 2,000. And so that's sort of how I've gone as through the years. Well, let's talk a little bit about the EV Society, because as we mentioned, you're out there and you're doing talks, but you've taken it a step further. You've joined the EV Society, and if I'm not mistaken, you're on the board as well, are you not?
yes, I'm a newly anointed and appointed board member. Yes.
Right. So clearly you're involved with it. So what are some of the things that the EV Society is, I guess, doing at the end of 2021 or gearing up for in 2022?
Well, we continue to work on messaging and information sharing. We want people to understand that. I mean, this is a gigantic transition that's taking place, and so many people own cars, and and they're all going to have to make this transition, and so there's a lot of angst out there, a lot of misunderstanding, and EV Society does a lot of things through a lot of different channels to help people, to help educate and inform about electrification and its benefits. There is a side of EV Society where effort is made lobbying government from the federal, provincial, and municipal levels to forward the cause of electrification and help push through policy and infrastructure change that makes will make EVs even more of a pleasure for people and easy for them to use. So EV Society is quite involved in all those things. And a self-plug, we do a webinar every month, which is something I really recommend folks tune into. You can watch them, as you have discovered, on YouTube on our playlist, or you can join live. And if I may, that webinar is called Canada Talks Electric Cars. Canada Talks Electric Cars. And we endeavor to have experts in the electric car field or in that general space come on and share their expertise in a variety of different topics. We do make sure we have a national audience for that webinar. So Canada Talks Electric Cars has people tuning in literally coast to coast to coast. And we make sure that the topics stay relevant to everybody. So we don't want to zero in that format to talk about just Ontario's issues or Alberta's issues. It's got to be a topic that connects with people right across. So things like that. EV Society is involved in a lot of different things, and we do events and hold meetings. And if you're not a member of a EV Society, please join. You can join for free, or you can really help us out by becoming a full member for $30 a year. And
you do have chapters all across the country.
We do. So
right?
I actually lead one of those chapters, the Mississauga chapter. But and so the idea of the local chapters is that they can become, if they wish to become a little bit more politically active, they can lobby their local government, in their region. With COVID, of course, everything's gone virtual, and so we've combined a lot of those local chapters into one virtual meeting every month. We have one coming up in 2 weeks. I just looked this morning, and something on the order of 60 or 70 people have already registered to attend that virtual meeting. So everybody's welcome to join, and you can meet some interesting car owners, people that maybe have the model of car that you might be eyeing, and you could talk to them about it. But in any event, we'll always be covering interesting topics in those meetings as well.
Right. Now, one of the things you mentioned there is you can lobby politicians. How important do you think that is when it comes to moving forward with EVs?
Well, I think it is important. I think if you look at the EV landscape in Canada right now, you'll find that two provinces totally dominate the sales picture, the sales story. Those provinces are BC and Quebec. And it's no coincidence that those two provinces have maintained, for example, a rebate for electric car purchases. And that's in addition to a federal rebate, I think $5,000 right across Canada for certain electric cars. But these are provincial rebates on top. So BC and Quebec have clearly shown how powerful those incentives are in spurring on EV adoption. Ontario used to have, of course, a nice provincial rebate, which was taken away with the change of the last government. And hopefully that might come back. We hope that happens because it's consistent with everybody's goals on climate.
Well, and I think I was interviewing somebody from Nova Scotia not that long ago, and in Nova Scotia you can actually get rebates on e-bikes even.
Yeah, no.
So I mean, they're making it quite easy. So as a former journalist, my faith in politicians to do the right thing, more often than not, is very low. You were a VP in a company before. You likely had to deal with government officials there. You, like me, have lived long enough to see what government is capable of doing and what they're capable of ignoring. So what do you think government has to do to step up? I mean, outside of rebates, it just seems like, is the will there to make a change?
The proof is in the pudding, right? We'll see over time how this plays out. But we have set before us these goals for climate change. If we are to meet those goals, then part of the the process has to involve electrification of transportation. It's just too big a piece of the pie to ignore. Will they do it? I think that there is some will. I think in politics there are always compromises, and we just hope the compromises don't get in the way of meeting this much needed target, these deadlines. So I'm going to remain optimistic that this will happen. I mean, it's going to happen one way or another. We might as well do it in such a way that we benefit society and the climate.
Do you think, because one of the things that keeps coming up, I mean, we're talking about a major change when it comes to the vehicles that we get on the road. And we're not talking about very far down the road. Like 2030 is one of the deadlines. 2035 is another one when it comes to vehicles. One thing that would concern me is that if everybody's plugging in at home, how will the electrical grid handle things? Because, you've got places in California, other spots of the world that I'm thinking of. I don't know that brownouts happen as often in Canada as they might in some of the major states. But it doesn't even seem to me like the infrastructure is there. And I don't know that we have enough time to build the infrastructure to meet the goals that we have set for ourselves as well.
For sure, Rob, infrastructure is an issue and it will need to be addressed. I don't believe that the amount of energy is very much of an issue. I think that can be scaled. The extra electricity needed is not the issue, but you're right. Delivering it to the right place at the right time is going to be challenging. The reality is that, in my opinion, people aren't going to all switch tomorrow to electric cars. Like it or not, there is going to be a bit of a curve. I mean, if you've just purchased a brand new ICE gas vehicle, then chances are you're going to want to drive that for 10 years or more. So the whole fleet will take time to adapt. And I think that will also provide time for infrastructure to adapt. There are really clever solutions emerging to deal with scheduling of charging so that you blunt that peak charging time and spread it over. When you think about it, most of us, our cars are parked, 95% of the time, and they could be charging at any point during that idle period. It doesn't have to be all starting at 7 p.m. To start charging. You can spread that over, or you can have software that does it. The software could do it for a whole street, a whole subdivision. It could do it for a condominium building or other multi-unit building. So there are solutions to this, and I think there is time. It's going to take effort and it's going to take investment, but I think it's all quite manageable.
And the investment part, and you mentioned the rebates, it's interesting because, of course, you get people kicking up a fuss about that. Here in Alberta, people kick up a fuss about doing things for renewable energy, and clearly not everybody, but there's a vocal minority that will do that, yet they never seem to have a problem with the billions that we gave the oil industry. Mm-hmm. So I always find that kind of interesting, how that works. Now, your Tim Talks, we're going to touch on that now, apparently last about 35 minutes. That's where we're at right now in our show right now. So it seems only fitting that that's about time that we talk about your Tim Talks. So you've decided to go right in on the EV. You're on your second vehicle now. You're with the EV Society. You give talks. Tell us a little bit about Tim Talks and why you decided to branch out and come up with your own brand as well.
Thanks, Rob. It all started kind of, I won't say by accident, but my next door neighbor belonged to a club in Waterdown, Ontario, and called the Probus Club. And he was aware that I had purchased an electric car, and he was curious about it and asked a few questions. And then one day he came across and he said, "Tim, would you be willing to come and speak to our Probus Club and tell them about what this is like driving an electric car?" And so long story short, I did that. And that Probus Club, the talk was really quite well received. And I had two people from that group approach me after the talk and said, "Would you come our church group meets, and we do have a social meeting every month, and we'd love to have you come and talk to us about that. And another one was another Probus Club guest. So anyway, that's how it started. And I refined the presentation considerably, and I've changed it over time. But basically, it's like a very, I'm going to say it's a primer about electric cars, but it's fairly detailed. And and it takes about 35 minutes or so to go through it. And I take a really brief history of electric cars. People think that's all new technology, and of course it isn't. It was electric cars were more popular than gas cars at the turn of the century, and sort of just very quickly go over that, and then the EV1 and what happened with General Motors' first all-electric, and then right into the present day and what's happening. And I deal with all those myths and misconceptions about what it's like to really have an electric car and drive it and charge it and all those good things. So it's evolved over time, and I'm now being asked to come back to some of the groups to talk again. And this time I've revamped the talk, and I talk more about autonomous vehicles and self-driving cars and where that technology is and what that's going to mean for society, which is pretty profound when you start to really think about it. So it's been fun. I just because we were meeting to do this today, I took a quick look, and I've done since COVID, I had to switch from in-person meetings for groups to virtual. And I was surprised to see I had 51 virtual talks now since COVID started. And quite a few, I think like 160 talks now I've done live and in person at different events. So it's been fun, it's been rewarding, and it always ends at that 35-minute mark or so with a Q&A. And I think I probably like that the best, because that's where I get the questions that are really on people's minds. They're very open. They're very, it's sort of informative to feel and hear what people are thinking about when the topic of electric cars is on the table. And it's changed, as I said earlier. Those questions have really changed and evolved over time. I thought by now people wouldn't really care to hear much more about electric cars, but it's the opposite. There's now more interest in it than ever. And so I don't think I'll run out of places to do my talks, but I do that for free. It's this is a hobby. This is just something because I think it's important to do, and I enjoy doing it. So anybody who happens to see this, if you belong to a company, a church, a school, a club of any sort, I've talked for the Rolls-Royce Club of Ontario and done a talk about electric cars. So any of those groups that would be interested, just reach out and we can schedule it, maybe in person one day soon, but for now, still virtual. I'd love to do it.
Interesting. You mentioned Rolls-Royce, because I just got word this week that I also do photos, and a friend of mine did a photo shoot on some Rolls-Royces, and it's going into their next issue. So that's kind of fun with that. One of the things that I noticed is that looking at the photos on your website, you're hitting the next generation as well, aren't you? You're not just talking to adults about this.
Yeah, absolutely true. So one of the school requests I had, of all things, was for a kindergarten class, and in the Guelph area. And I thought, well, how am I going to do this? I definitely need a new deck to get through this one. But I did, and I have a dear friend who's a retired school teacher from, early grade school teacher, and she was wonderful to help me bring this topic into the idea of energy and things coming from the sun and flowers, and we managed to tie it all into a very nice little deck that they really loved. And then when after I would do one of these kindergarten classes, we take everybody outside, and the Tesla Model X does a little show where the doors flap to music and the lights flash, and so we did that. And here in this picture you're showing, I'm asking them, where did the engine go? Because they're all looking in there and it's just a big empty space. So it was that was a lot of fun. Really enjoyed doing that.
Yeah, one of the things I really enjoyed about going to schools years ago and giving talks is it didn't matter what you had to say. Questions invariably came around to, I have a puppy. What do you have?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
You found that as well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They have their own thread of conversation that will
Yes.
be followed. Yeah. Yeah.
I absolutely love that because you never had any idea what was going to come out of it. And then all of a sudden you thought you had to be on your toes during the presentation, but you really have to be on your toes during the Q&A afterwards.
Yeah.
One of the things, and I chuckled at, because on your site you have a listing of 4 talks, and it's talk number 1: should your next car be electric? Talk number 2: autonomous vehicles will change our future. Talk number 3: whiskey and wine and a career in the alcohol industry. And
Yeah.
then number 4, you get back to the car industry again. And the first time I looked at it without seeing your bio, I thought, that is an interesting mix that you've got going on. But that is a little bit to do with your past career, isn't it?
Yeah, and I can explain why that's there, and it's because when you do a talk and somebody's doing your introduction, they read out a brief biography, your brief bio, and of course my career was in the beverage alcohol industry, and I left the industry as vice president at a company called 40 Creek Distillery, and I'd spent many years there. So that gets read into my bio. And so I don't know how many times after I finish my car talk, someone would say, well, we got to get you back to talk about whiskey.
Exactly.
Like that sort of stuck in people's mind. And I heard that so many times. I decided, well, and I didn't really want to do a talk about that because, when you're just retired, I was separating myself from my working life. And for the first few years, I didn't want to talk about that. But now, you look back on it and there were some interesting stories and some interesting information, and people are curious about wine and now spirits. So I do a talk about whiskey, and if you watch one of my talks about that, at the end you'll be an expert. You can make whiskey, you can make beer, and you can make wine. So
Excellent. And you can make a contribution to the environment by getting an EV.
Well, that too. Absolutely.
Yes.
Just don't drive it while you're trying your whiskey and wine. And
well, you know what? This seems like a spot where we can drop in a little bit about the autonomous vehicle, which may or may not be a help in that area. But when you think about that, it seems like we're still a ways away, clearly, from mass production of fully autonomous vehicles. What do you think from what you've seen out there so far?
Well, the first thing I think is that I agree with you that we're a little distance away from it being a reality. There seems to be a lot of debate about the timing. I don't think not too many people are in the camp that says it's never going to happen. That self-driving vehicles will come to be at some point. It's just the question is at what point. And if you listen to the likes of, Tesla has sort of lost their bravado about that. They're still working diligently to make autonomous vehicles happen. But you, of course, hear that all of the other major car companies are working at it, often from a different angle, which is good. I think more people working on a problem is better than just having one person working on a problem. But it will come. And I'm on the camp that I have no idea when. The car I drive now has the full self-driving capability purchased in it, but it's certainly a long way from being able to do that. I do think, though, when it does happen and when autonomous vehicles do arrive in the market, that it will have a profound change impact on our society. I don't think you won't need two car family homes because one car can drop one person off and then keep going and drop the other person off, and things like that. Why would you spend? And if you've ever seen any of the talks by the likes of Tony Seba, who talks about energy in the future and how things are changing. Maybe we won't own cars. Maybe you will look at the cost of a car and say, why do I need to spend $60,000-$70,000 on a shiny new vehicle when I can just summon a driverless one to my door to take me wherever I want to go, and pay for the parking and everything? I don't have to worry about any of that stuff. So there are huge and then everybody involved in transportation, the trucking industry, if it becomes autonomous, unfortunately, there'll be a lot of jobs disrupted because, the cost of a driver is a big cost to trucking industry. It's a big expense, and they could maybe eliminate that or reduce it. So things like that, and so many things we have that are delivered by taxis and pizza, or whatever, it could all be done autonomously, and it will change things greatly.
Well, autonomously, or it could be done by drones as well, right? Because that's I know I think it was 4 years ago, I was in Rwanda. And in Kigali, you're seeing drones flying all over the place. And I asked my host what was going on. Well, it's for medical reasons because you can't get ambulances, you can't get doctors to all these places. And I just thought, wow, Rwanda has this already, and this was not a new technology for them. The autonomous vehicle is intriguing. Of course, we had a story in Alberta, I think it was last year, about a couple of guys flying down the highway looking like they were sleeping in the back of the, reclined back. And of course, fortunately, the RCMP spotted them and took care of that incident, because there's always going to be people, I think, that abuse technology regardless of what it is.
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't think you're ever going to get away from that. I mean, people can do bad things now without autonomous cars. You can put boards out on the road with nails. You can do things to sort of cause problems for drivers. The problems that can be caused will be different when they're autonomous. You can put up a fake stop sign. Will that stop the car? Or a false speed limit sign. Will that make the car drive too fast? You can always find ways to cause trouble. But they'll always be illegal to do and come with a penalty if you're caught. So,
well, do you have any concerns about that? Because I mean, we're sitting here talking over our computers. Clearly, we've got malware, we've got all these sorts of antivirus things to make sure everything is fine that way. When I talked to somebody who was an engineer a little while ago, and he seemed quite concerned about the fact that there could be hackers out there that, and it may be a little bit beyond our time, Tim, but hackers out there that could really do some damage if everything is electric and run by computers.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always that risk. I mean, to discount that as a concern would be foolhardy. But I also think that there are a lot of clever people that are working on these issues. And I don't like to keep harping back on one company, Tesla, but that Elon Musk made much of his fortune, his early fortune, selling a product called PayPal. And coming up to Christmas, we all know what PayPal is, and it's very, very secure. He has some understanding of security and its importance, and I think that carries over into his car company. And I think the other car companies are the same. They will, I'm sure they will devote as much energy as is required to create a very confident level of security around their autonomous technology. Doesn't mean we shouldn't think about it, but I'm not so sure it's going to be a big, big problem.
All right. Well, let's leave on a positive note here. Tell us some things that you think that I guess if you're looking into buying an EV, what are some of the things that you can look forward to through that experience?
Well, in terms of how you choose an electric car, or
yeah, let's start there. Yeah.
Okay. So for choice, the starting point isn't too much different for us than it is for an ICE vehicle, a gas car. If you need a small SUV because of family size or pets or some other reason, then that's going to start your search, and you'll have to look for the vehicle format that suits your needs and the size. Beyond that, there still are. Still, I would say is a shortage of electric cars, but there are more and more, and it's becoming much easier to find an electric car that suits your need in terms of the format and size. One of the things, because we do live in a colder climate, and because there is some energy, not loss, but loss in efficiency in cold weather with electric cars, that's a natural part of it. So you want to have enough buffer. You want to make sure you buy an electric car with enough range to take care of your needs, even in the colder climates. What I've sort of gravitated to the point now that in Ontario for our winters, I would suggest people look only at electric cars that have, I'm going to say, 350 kilometers or more of range. And the more your range your budget can afford, because often these cars come with different size batteries. If you can afford to take a larger battery, I think it's a good idea. I think it just gives you a little more confidence. But it very much depends. If you need a runabout in the city just to get around the city and shop, well, you don't need 350 kilometers of range, because remember, it's going to be full every morning when you get in it. And it's going to get filled up in the night. And so you're going to start every day with a full tank. And that's another thing that people who haven't had electrics don't realize. These are the things you have to think about. And you want to look to see if you are on a budget. You want to make sure you're taking full advantage of whatever incentive programs might be in place. So make sure the car you're looking at qualifies, because not all cars qualify right now, for example, for the $5,000 federal rebate. And so you want to just check on that, make sure that you're good to go. So I think those are some of the key things.
Excellent.
You will want to know, whether it's all-wheel drive or just rear-wheel drive or front-wheel drive. And so just like gas cars, electric cars are now available in all these different formats. And if you do that kind of driving, you want all-wheel drive, then there'll be an electric car out there for you.
Right. And here in Edmonton right now, our streets are like skating rinks. And so all-wheel drive may be the thing you need, or even just being aware what works better for you, front wheel or rear wheel drive as well. So many things to consider. Is there anything that you'd like to leave us with, Tim, before I let you get on with your day?
Oh, thanks, Rob. Well, yeah, I guess I would. Thanks for all the folks who stuck with you today to this point in the interview. And if your viewers haven't had a chance to visit the evsociety.ca website, I strongly recommend you take a look at it if you're at all interested in electric cars. Great resource, lots of information available there, and ways to connect and maybe start coming to a monthly EV Society meeting. You'd be most welcome to come, or tune into the Canada Talks Electric Cars webinar. Is also a link through their website, evsociety.ca website, to do that. So I guess on that note, I'll just say wish everybody a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and thanks, Rob, for having me on.
Excellent, Tim. It's been absolutely wonderful. Enjoy the rest of your day. And everyone, Tim mentioned the EV Society, of course, evsociety.ca. TimTalksTesla.com is another site that you can check out as well, because as Tim mentioned, he does a talk. It's about 35 minutes long, and he's happy to take questions from you afterwards. And he can handle everything from how long does it take to charge a battery, what's the range, and if you've got kids, he can talk about puppies as well. Apparently, he's got that covered also, so you don't have to worry about that. So again, that's TimTalksTesla.com and evsociety.ca. Lots of great information at the latter as well. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. I'm your host, Rob Hislop, and we'll see you again next time. And here we go.
Electric Conversations is brought to you by Zap Charge. Zap Charge, building Canada's most reliable charging network.